If you could just introduce yourself to the audience when you ask a question so that we know who to sue later.
Hi. Clearly technology challenged. Warren Hill, I'm the chair of the AIA in Victoria and account director at AppScore. We're not a startup, sadly. We're a very quickly growing scale-up at insane rate. I wanted to talk a little bit. AIA runs a report every year regarding the state of the nation, similar to the Digital Pulse with a different view. We're really focused on candidates and people coming into the industry. I was shocked, and a lot of the universities were shocked. Our numbers this year for job-ready candidates coming out of university dropped to 5%. It's been hovering around 10 to 12 for the last couple of years, and then COVID came along and suddenly we've dropped to 5, which is kind of terrifying, really. And I wanted to talk about education in Australia. I think it's pretty clear that the education process is broken from kindergarten, as you mentioned, all the way through to the university space. We were at a digital skills summit a couple of weeks ago, and one of the educators pointed out to us that the school system we currently follow was built in the 1930s and the 1940s to occupy children so they didn't bother women so they could do their housework, and they didn't bother the man who was going to work. And we haven't actually changed that system since then. And you talked a little bit about the concept of degrees and getting a degree to differentiate, and why is that a necessary evil? And it's quite incredible. We advertise specifically without ever mentioning that you need a degree for all of our job ads, because you don't need a degree to be a coder. In fact, my son built an application during COVID for the school, which I didn't even know he'd done, and he got an award for it, which I found out when I thought he was getting the cricket award. And was devastated, and he was highly amused by the fact that he said, you thought I was getting cricket? I said, yes, that's why I came. And you got a tech award for coding something, and I didn't even know you knew how to code. He said, I don't know how to code. I just built this app. And I think, to your point around how technology is really part of your life now, education isn't keeping up with the way that the next generation is using tech. What can we do, and how do we embrace those people that are really never going to go through that formal education process?
Thank you. Can we hand to you first, please, SMK? Oh, sorry.
So one of the first things I do when I sit down with a hiring manager to learn about the job I'm going to recruit for is to really find out why they're looking for who they're looking for. So give me the reasons why, and oftentimes I'm pushing back. We have a lot of issues in hiring people because of bias, and that's a known problem. So I spend a lot of time talking with my teams right up front around what that unconscious bias might be, whether it's the halo syndrome. Oh, they went to school, an amazing school. Look, they went to Harvard, give them a job. I've worked with a number of people who went to Harvard, no offense to anybody in this room, that are not that great. I would say that there's another concept called the distance traveled that I want people to think about when they're hiring somebody, which is how long or how hard was it for that person to get to this room today? Did your parents pay for you to go to private school? Did you get a scholarship to go to university? Was it much easier for this person to get there versus another person? So really looking at a candidate's journey to get there. And I think the other responsibility we have is something we've talked about a lot today, which is the company's responsibility to upskill employees. So maybe a candidate's not, maybe they're 80% of the way there, but encouraging the teams to think about, can we train on the other 20%? How much do we really need to know that language? Do they have the foundational skills? Do they have values that would mesh well with our companies? So really thinking about those key things as you set out to find somebody to join you, and being more open to that, I think, is incredibly crucial.
Thank you. And if I can ask Chris, particularly because the association focuses on individuals and their pathways from education through, your views on that education system piece, particularly because the ACS effectively inherit the people coming out of it.
Wow. Leading up again to the Skills Summit, I was invited to a summit or roundtable with the group of 8 leading universities here in Australia. And it was a fascinating discussion because they had opened it up to the group of 8, but other technology professionals, tech companies, us, a number of people. And everybody was talking about this exact same thing. And the group of 8, with all due respect, not their issue. No, they've got it under control. They know what they're doing. They've got graduates. They've got smart people, not concerned. So I'm not throwing them under the bus. I'm just saying that there is a belief that the way Australians do formal education is right on target, no need to change, and it's not going to, therefore. Now, with that said, I think, and again, the digital pulse talks about this, is there are multiple pathways into this space. And there will always be a role. We will always need those people who go through formal programs. There's no question about that. The challenge is that we need to broaden that, exactly what you said, and start looking and developing formal pathways in other ways to bring people in. And whether that's in adjacent industries, whether you're UX or whether you're a domestic engineer, a housewife who actually has time and interest, and we need to start training that person. So I think as a country, we need to be very clear on what those pathways are and start building feeder systems into those pathways so that they can all converge, so people like you, when you're looking for that talent, have a broad range of people with a broad range of skill sets.
Great. Now, I won't go to each panel member because I'm conscious we've got a lot of questions to get through. Carl.
Yeah. I'm from a university, so I like the idea of lifelong learning because that means we'll be able to design lots of certification programs and lots of degrees, and we'll be able to make lots of money. So I really like it. But the other side of it is that in 1986, I was at the University of Maryland, Computer Science Department at College Park as a visiting researcher, and I gave a presentation on the undergraduate degree that I'd helped design at RMIT, and the room was silent. And Vic Basili, and if there are people who know about software engineering, they'll know who Vic Basili is, stuck his hand up and said, "And what kind of people are you producing?" My response was, "Sharp, cutting instruments." Sharp, cutting instruments. These people could go anywhere in the world and compete with people from the best universities anywhere in the world without 3 years. Not only they did that, one of the guys I'd tried to fail rang me up in the middle of the night from Sunnyvale, and I won't use the language he used, but loosely translated, he questioned the legitimacy of my paternity, as Australians do. And he said, "You, so-and-so, you tried to fail me. I am competing with people from MIT. I'm competing with people from Berkeley. I run rings around them." And my response to him was undiplomatic. I said, I still try to fail you. Now, what I'm saying is that and also at Maryland, I can remember saying to them, "Why don't you put your undergraduate degree as a double degree in computer science?" And the guy responsible for that part of their system said, "We're not going to do that because if we do, they won't come back and do master's degrees." Now, I think that the group of 8 are right, basically, and I can introduce you to my graduates who will say something similar, who are in very senior positions. But I wanted to come back to software engineering. I'm an engineer. I'm only an engineer because I graduated from an engineering undergraduate program, not for any other reason. I'm not a software engineer. I didn't graduate from one of the handful of accredited software engineering degrees anywhere. I listened carefully to our friend from car sales. I'm a heavy-duty car sales user, and whenever I use it, I ask myself, what could I make better? What could I do with the car sales site with better? And then 2 things kick in. that I learned both as an undergrad, not as an undergraduate, that I taught about. One of them was called technical debt. Now, what is it going to cost me to make the change? And then there's a more subtle one, which is even far more important because you must have hundreds of thousands of users, is it's called a reverse customer lock-in. And the reverse customer lock-in means that if I change something, then my customer should not find a reason for moving off my product. And what it essentially means is that that if it's as difficult to move from this gentleman's camera to a Nikon, when Canon upgrade their system, I may choose a Nikon. Whereas if Canon take the trouble to keep it the same, I know I'm going on a bit, but the thing is that what I really wanted to say was, I believe it's 2022. And I think that if we want to use the technology, we should no longer be looking at what's already there. We should be defining the problem. And if you can define the problem sensibly, we can probably do it. And second thing is we should do it so that it has the minimum disruption on the user. It's as easy as possible, preferably invisible to the user. So thanks for being patient with me.
Do you want a job at car sales?
I'll say that.
I just wanted to say I have nothing against the Group of 8. Nothing against the Group of 8. They're a great group of organizations. So.
Yeah, would you like to give us a response on that, seeing as you've got that example, and then we'll go out for another question if we can.
I think it's really great that we, using the car sales example, car sales has a purpose which is really easy to understand. It's making, buying and selling a great experience. But really, what we talk about all day is buying and selling a car sucks. It just sucks. Unless you're an absolute car aficionado, it's an awful thing to have to go through. And there's a lot of money attached to it, and it's very stressful. So as opposed to making this a delightful experience, we should just do what we say on the tin and take away the stress and the anxiety and all the problems that go with doing this. And if we do that, our customers will stay loyal to us.
Sorry, and I don't know your name, I'm sorry. Thank you, Emma. And thank you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Emma from EPCO. I'm a people and culture consultant. I can see an opportunity for filling this race for talent, and it's part-time workers. We seem to have this amazing opportunity at the moment where we're already having people working at home and in the office, working different hours. How are we not capitalising on the 30% of the population that works that works part-time? I did the stats last week. There were 12,600 jobs advertised on Seek for ICT roles, 100 part-time. That just slays me. There's this huge opportunity. Who could take this amazing potential workforce and capitalise on it?
So at the moment, I don't want to be the facilitator. Actually, can I ask Chris and for you not to answer it? I'm going to throw this, in fact, to Assail and Deborah as the emerging talent. What do managers need to do in that respect? And are you seeing it?
Yes, I think based on my personal experience, again, where I work, we do have a lot of part-timers and casuals because we're quite flexible with people's other commitments and sort of working with that and also getting our work done. And maybe the 100 jobs you saw, Emma, on that is from KPMG, looking for part-timers. But I think you make a valid point. It's about sort of not lowering the bar, but being flexible with, who you are open to. Not everyone needs to commit to full-time hours, right? Some people, I feel like, might be able to work part-time hours and get more work done than a full-timer. So at the end of the day, it comes down to their ability to work and what they can get done. So, yeah.
Deborah, because you've got a really interesting take on all this. What do you think?
I was thinking during the questions first that you said something at the beginning that I was talking before coming with my colleagues. That is, what happened with us that we advertise job positions in a way that is quite opposite the future world that we want to promote. We have a problem around the world with that. The job position thing, what means having a job is not, I mean, it's the same thing that Montessori and many other people said. If we don't want a society that is made for the industrial times, don't put children to look at the board and domesticate the body. So I feel this gap is huge, and as researchers, we need to do something with that. And from my experience, most of techies I know in Europe work in IoT and sensors and most like the AI now, they quit jobs to be freelance, and they do the job with task or wherever when they want, and nobody cares how much it costs to them. It was like the entire day, 8 hours, 6 hours. But I also believe we need to, things that we learned in the past 2 years is we need to socialize working. And this is Microsoft, I think, get out with it's a research they did during COVID that the innovation curve was like getting down because people didn't have chats outside of the task. So we need to solve that, but it's not about time. It's not about the. I think that's what Susan said. The job positions are not leading us where we want to go, but not only in the IT, in general. So we need to think about it. And one thing I want to comment, because, and I believe Georgia or Chris will be, from my perspective, getting the same impression, but in the universities and the research units and organizations, we are really trying to make people, customers, clients, aware of what's going on. We don't want any more technology that is invisible. And I know for some products could be important that, because I don't want to have an assurance that make visible every day, of course, or whatever, but I think we need to take people seriously. Like, we are not only clients. And if we want a transformation, then we need to lost certain things. And I believe technology should be more and more visible, more and more part of the granularity of everyday life, and not something that we cannot see. And smart cities is a huge example of that.
Georgia, AAA. So the tech industry, why aren't we fixing it?
Wow. He went straight for the kill there. Again, we're talking about a growing industry across all sectors. So if we were talking ICT in the 1970s, we were talking about a very different beast to what it is now. It is a fabric of our society, and in the few pockets that it's not, it will be over time. That change is absolutely coming. I probably won't really comment on the visibility part, but I do think, again, and it comes back to the point I made earlier around having that sort of more holistic approach. So bringing someone in where it's purely outcome driven, and I don't care how many hours they spend, it's totally, that's one piece of the puzzle. But if that's all I did for my team, I wouldn't have a team, because they need to learn, they need to interact, they need to engage with each other. And if I was just saying it's outcomes, well, I wouldn't care if they're in the office or not, but I do, because that's part of the way they learn. Do I want them there 5 days a week? No, God no. But I do want them in so that they're talking to each other, because the things you learn just standing in the hallway, the conversations you overhear, that's what enriches our life. People, we're social animals. And part of that is around the skills that we get, but part of that is also around how we do our jobs. Where you've met someone and you speak to them, you're more likely to reach out and ask them for help, or they're more likely to come to you than if it's just a transactional almost, here's the solution, here it is, and see you later. So I think that's, it's probably not quite the answer you were looking for, but it's a piece of the puzzle.
No. And I'll go back to the audience, and on just the parting note on that, we're mostly at the management layer when you're advertising your next job for job share or part-time. Next question. Sorry. Gentleman with the epaulets, I think was next. Sorry. Thank you.
I'm Nick Bushler. I'm an economist at the Victorian Department of Treasury and Finance. So this is prompted by something that SMK said, but it's addressed to everyone. Just talking about, I think you mentioned about there being a limited talent pool for software engineers or software developers in Melbourne, where it's often seen in the tech industry that, if you've made it, you go to America, or, for me, it's, you've got to go to New York or London for economics or finance. What do you think we can do here to retain talent in Victoria? And also, what do you think the Victorian government can do to help to retain talent?
Oh, who'd like to kick off on that one?
Can we add what can the ACS do?
That's such a good one, and that's 30,600 software engineers in the whole of Australia, not just in Melbourne, which I was like, wow, okay. I think that we do something interesting here with visas once candidates go through, people come from overseas to go to the universities here, is that we don't usually make it very easy for people to stay here in Australia and continue to work, so that's definitely like a call out. The other thing that I would say is, there's a brain drain a bit, right? I know tons of Australians. In fact, that's how I met my husband in San Francisco, that went overseas to kind of have that experience and that exposure and sometimes don't come back. But what I have been seeing over the last 2 years is that many Australians that are overseas have maybe been a little disenchanted by like what was happening there with politics or with COVID, and have chosen to come home. So I have been talking to a lot of candidates in San Francisco and New York that are looking to come home, looking to start their families, looking to have their families be safe in their schools. And I think that there are a lot of benefits for people to come home. Now that's just like my anecdotal piece there. But I think that one thing I've noticed, especially in startups, is that startups have needed to be competitive with salaries in like Metro 1 cities. And so oftentimes we are looking at Radford data across the board to ensure that our salaries are just as competitive as, say, if you were working in New York or in San Francisco, if you're working in Sydney or Melbourne. So that's definitely a way. Another way is to incentivize people in startups with equity or ESOP packages, which I know that the rules have changed in the last few years, making it a lot more fair and a lot easier to grant people shares in companies. So I think that that is definitely going to change the excitement about coming back to work in Australia or to stay and work in Australia.
Thanks, Georgia.
Just a quick piece on that, and that is a section where government does have a role to play. So those changes to the ESOP rules, that's around changing the taxing point from when they join the business to when they're making money and they're getting a benefit. And that's a really obvious way, because a lot of people do want to come back to Australia. And so providing those mechanisms is another way to make sure that where the startup can't afford to pay for them, there are other ways where they're buying in and they do have that stake.
So to your point, we need to really focus on how ACS helps all parties in the ecosystem, because there are universities, there's government, there's corporate, there's associations. There are a number of players in this ecosystem. Each one of us play a part in making sure that the ecosystem is successful. And so we can play our part in creating a community, a home for technology professionals, and actually give them an opportunity and a desire to be here, to your point. But that takes work of everybody in that ecosystem. No one can do it alone. Everybody has to be working together. We were talking about this earlier. It's all hands on deck. We all got to work together in doing it. And if we can do that, I think we will scale the ability of people to stay in Australia.
To give a response on this one. Small business in Victoria. I give shout out to Victorian government. I got a grant during COVID, and I took on intention. I was intending to take on one intern. Applicants were so good, I took on two. took them on a casual basis, so coming back to the earlier point about employment, enormously successful. I coached them into their next roles. One was successful applicant out of 800 for a job. Another grant application program came up and I went to apply for it. I could only apply for it if I was taking the person on full time. So I just didn't take them on. If you apply that to the small business ecosystem, we're cutting them out of the equation. Can't help myself. Sorry. No.
Hi, I'm Kelly Hutchinson with Victorian Government, Digital Innovation Futures, and also with Pearcey Foundation. One of the things actually made my heart sing when I heard you speaking was about being an anthropologist and being an arts graduate and an information systems grad. The imaginary, the socio-technical imaginary, that we are the people who create the tech, we use the tech, we are the tech. And I couldn't help but talk about Pearcey, Trevor Pearcey, who led, if anybody doesn't know in the room, but who led the team that built the world's 4th computer in this country. That was really who saw the future and just said, I don't exactly know what we're going to build, I don't exactly know what it's going to do, but I know it's going to be important. So it's that future looking, so we're looking at the work of the future. So I'm interested that one of the things we talk about is that we look to our history to be able to know where we want to go in the future. So is there something that you think in the past decade, 20 years, that an opportunity we've missed? We talk about the lucky country disrupted is one of the discussions we've been having for about 15 years. So we're at this tipping point, and we don't want to go backwards as in the past of work, but we are at that inflection point. What can we learn from the past that we can take now to not take into the future?
Deborah?
I don't know, but I was in a workshop like 2 months ago when I arrived from health unit in Monash. They are designers working with health technology, and I arrived 1 week before, so I didn't know anything about the trajectory of health technology in Australia, and they create this amazing line time with different technologies and different social actors and experts on the area need to put everything. And then I saw 2 decades, 19th and 2000, full of technologies, full of facilities, full of everything, and then 2010, and then nothing. So I don't know what we miss or what is the inflection, but I think I don't remember your name, but the architecture of buildings in Carsale, he said something about it's not the technology or it's not the product or it's not the device, it's an ecosystem, and in the deep sense of ecosystem. Things now, for example, I know health startups are a huge ecosystem here. What is going on there? That is what need to be at, looking at. Giving that resources and all of us looking, I mean something like ecosystems, it's us. Technology is us, ecosystems. We need to understand what's going on and to imagine a distant future. And not because it's difficult, and we know, it's difficult to imagine something different of the present we have or the past. And we need to improve that, imagine differently, but it's knowing where we are and where are the possibilities. I think it's about what we miss, or what we miss. What I understand from that timeline is it was something happening, but some actors didn't get that, and it happened. And now we are in the next. I don't know how to solve it, but looking at what's going on, and I think you said the same, is quite important. And we are always talking about things to come, but in thinking this future we desire, but not the future we can build, and the future that could be good for the people we are dealing with, and the nation you have, and the amazing people you have here, and the amazing people that can come. Training is a key thing in that. Training for what? For that future, for the present, how this is thinking. But as where things are happening, then we need to look at that. And not because are not up to what we want, let them go. It's what I believe from top of the head.
else like to take that one as well?
I might just add to that actually. I've been in Australia for 8 years, so I can't comment on anything that happened before that. But based on my observations, I think in terms of the opportunities Australia may have missed, I think the first one might be around retaining good skill in the country. Because when I did my university degree at Monash, I think there was like 100 students that, enrolled first day. The lecture theatre was full. And on the last day when we finished university and like the exams, I think there was like 55 graduates, right? And a lot of people have dropped off because the courses were hard and they wanted to do other things. And in that handful of people that actually did graduate, not everyone stayed. I know a lot of friends who couldn't get the visas, who didn't get support from their work or the immigration to stay and work. And because of that, they had to go to other countries like Canada, US, and even New Zealand. And I think that's one of the opportunities Australia may have missed. And I think secondly, with regards to startups, and I know personally startups do quite a lot of innovative work. And I think in the past few years, there were a little bit of uncertainty when it came to government support. And especially, for example, take programs like the R&D program. There was a lot of uncertainty, especially with the software clients, because they got picked up and they got audited and nobody wanted to claim. And because of that, because of the lack of support, I actually saw some of my clients take their teams to offshore, like the Philippines, China, and India. And that's one way to sort of lose talent as well. So I think they were the two sort of highlights from what I've seen.
Now, unfortunately, we are out of time. So I will hand back to the wonderful Jordan from the Pearcey Foundation to close off for us this afternoon and lead our closure. And thank you to our panellists.
Thanks, everybody. So just, first of all, just a couple of quick promotions very quickly. For the Pearcey Foundation, you heard earlier that one of the things we do is we have the Pearcey Oration, which is one of the most significant technology orations in the country. So there is some information up there for you, and we'd encourage you to come along. We've got Minister Ed Husick from the federal government, but I want you to understand that when we talk about the oration, our orator, while they're an important person, is there to speak about their perspective. So this is not going to be a political discussion. This is going to be his personal view from his perspective, which is a really interesting perspective for all of us to have. The other thing is I must make sure that I promote one of our partners in the DIF, and that's the Churchill Club Top Tech Trends Debate. This is, for those of you who don't know, the Churchill Club is a wonderful organisation based on an organisation of the same name out of Silicon Valley, and they bring together, as much as we have done today, discussion and debate around what's going on, with a particular focus in their case on startups. And so the Top Tech Trends Debate, and there's a discount code there, so you can get 20% off their pricing for the Top Tech Trends Debate, which is tomorrow. With that, just as so in closing remarks, I'd like to invite Wayne Fitzsimmons, who's the chairman of the Pearcey Foundation.
Thanks very much, Jordan, and thanks to everybody coming along, and particularly to the panel. Sorry I was a bit late. I've got a good excuse. I wanted to ask a question, given I'm an old guy. I'm still involved with startups. The one thing about the future of work which puzzles me is the rhetorical question, are we making progress in terms of our gender balance? Are we making progress in avoiding anti-slavery situation in the workplace? I heard a figure last night. 7% of the CEOs of the top 200 companies in Australia are female. 7%. I mean, so, and we've got all these wonderful aims, and I'm supportive of that because I come from the startup world. How are we going to change the gender balance? You know, do you have to measure it and enforce it? Do you have to measure how many slaves we have. You have to measure how many employees are deemed employees versus contractors, because that's all coming, and the taxation system is getting, it's going to be very difficult to avoid. So I'll just leave that out there as an open question. So I don't know everybody on the panel, and I got here a bit late, but I was intrigued by the last half hour or the last hour, and I really appreciate the thought and the comments made, and I have had the pleasure of bending Chris's ear, even though he's a new arrival in Australia. I've been away in the US myself. I've worked in the US for a long time and have 3 children there. So I'm very familiar with that workplace there, and to the point, gentleman from RMIT, in my education here, I went and worked in the US, and I, like many Australians, extremely competitive, and I made it, so to speak. But I did have a good education, and I've never thought about it in terms of what did it train me for. Well, it trained me technically, but taught me to think. So just formally, I'd like to say thank you to Kelly, who's a fellow board member of the Pearcey Foundation and a stalwart of the industry, and leading the DIF. How many years is it now? 7 years. I'm pleased to say that Pearcey's been there from day one. I met Kathy Curtis outside, and she's retiring in the end of this month, and I really want to thank her for all her efforts and creating this environment where we can have, even so a small number of people, there's lots of these activities through the hyperactivity level of Kelly and Kathy. And particularly to the ACS for hosting this in this wonderful facility that they have here in Docklands. I think it's a wonderful facility to have to attract industry discussions of this ilk. And I would, in closing, say thank you very much to our host here to moderate the session this afternoon, and point out that Ed Husick is coming. We tried to have it this week, but they had a little thing called a job summit last week, and it sort of got in the way. We lost out in competition, but I hope that you can join us, because it's going to be an interesting thing. He reached out through a mutual friend. He wants to talk and communicate and hear back from industry and talk to industry about his agenda. So I'm really looking forward to that. We have a minister who's actually interested in the IT industry. That makes a change. I won't tell you, but a recent Pearcey medalist, I tried to get the minister, the equivalent of Ed, to just get on the Zoom and just say 5 minutes, say thanks. I begged them, and they said, you have to send a letter. I've done that. You have to send an email. I've done that. You have to make appointments, and I've done that. 0. And when I asked the medalist, what do you think? He said, bunch of wankers. So it was terrible. Nobody was interested in talking to the industry at a high level. And this is what Ed's doing, and I would encourage you. You see these ministers, they are really trying to reach out, and I think we've got a great opportunity. So hope you can see you there, but thank you very much to everybody who came along, and see you next time.